Our next speaker is sponsored by TRE Australia. And in linking with that, our speaker is going to be speaking on postpartum shivers, on what's the term here? Neurogenic tremors, which I think is a great term. I really like that. Even as a poet, I find that quite satisfying to say, neurogenic tremors. So neurogenic tremors for birth, recovery, attachment, and well-being. So I would like to welcome into the space the physiotherapist and the national coordinator of TRE, who is the sponsor of this session as well, Richmond Heath. Hello, love.
Thank you very much for having me, Felicia, and for everyone. Am I the only man in this call?
Possibly currently.
Any male doulas? No male doulas at the moment. Anyway, so I'm going to start with the failure to progress, as it's known, and I might ask if you just think, what is the failure to progress? Now you all know what that is. So I want to ask you another question: what is it that's actually not progressing? Because it's not a conscious thing, is it? It's a physiological process. It's a bit like if you got halfway through puberty and puberty stopped, you wouldn't say, come on, we've just got to psycho-emotionally work through this, even though that can help. It needs to occur in the physiology of the body. So when we start to look at the nervous system, for want of a better word, has for some reason started to immobilize completely below the level of our conscious awareness. So I'm going to share my screen, and what I'm going to do is do a bit of a PowerPoint presentation, hopefully to not too long. Please interrupt me if I go too long, but I want to then also give some people a chance to experience the neurogenic tremors and see how easy it is to do. Okay, I'm going to share my PowerPoint slides, and hopefully this will work as we... So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail here, but what you need to know is that our stress response is first and foremost about movement, either the movement of the body through space, but also the movement in the internal structures and systems of the body, including, the peristaltic kind of movement of the uterus during birth. So we're all well aware, and people are aware, we've got our fight and flight response, we've got the immobility response. So if fight and flight can't deal with the stressor, and if the stressor is inside and the fear of pain and the feelings of pain, we can't run away from that. So the body goes into a more defended state, which is immobilization, which is effectively the body starting to shut down, brace, hold, and stop moving. Now, where the neurogenic movements kick back in is they are not part of the stress response. If someone's shaking, we think it's a sign of anxiety and fear. It's not a sign of fear. Yes, it's a sign they have been scared, but the shaking is actually how the body downregulates the nervous system in this stress and overwhelm situation. There's other ways, for example, orgasm. When your body starts to shake and tremor and undulate, we don't all go, oh my God, I must be releasing some trauma. So there's many different ways, but in this position of shock and immobility. And so the body's not just restoring movement to the physical structures of the muscles, but to the entire neuromuscular system, including all the involuntary parts of the uterus. Releasing that subconscious bracing. Now, what's really important is that stress response, fight and flight, freeze, it's not a conscious process. It's completely subconscious. If we could consciously choose not to do it, we all would. And so it makes sense that the way the body comes back out of that, like any animal, is also a subconscious reflex, which, at least at that physiological level, doesn't have anything to do with our cognitive mind, even though our cognitive mind can prevent this process. And what happens if we don't know that shaking and tremoring is normal, healthy, positive, a recovery response, a relaxation response, which is going to relax the psoas muscle, it's going to open up the pelvis, it's going to calm the respiratory system, it's going to change all the hormones back to a more grounded, relaxed place. And this happens not even just consciously, we subconsciously tend to create bracing because it's seen as a sign of shock, overwhelm, fear, something's out of control, we're completely out of control. And so, again, this is not necessarily conscious, but the body, we've been trained in our Western culture to suppress this. And so if the body can't downregulate through and restore spontaneous movement, then of course what happens in that immobility response is we start to become numb and disconnected from our body. Now in life, we end up using behaviors and substances and everything, Facebook, chocolate, everything it is, to stay disconnected from the unresolved tension and discomfort of unresolved trauma or constantly immobilized bracing patterns in the physiology of our body. Now, as you'd all be aware, when women are getting to this state where, there's pain, there's tension, there's bracing, there's complete overwhelm. I like this the 3 M's, massage, meds, and movement, not necessarily epidural, or, gas, everything. So there's all these things that we're trying to do to help the physiology of the body to relax and allow the spontaneous movement. When I was teaching Pilates before I learnt TRE, when I had women who were pregnant, I used to give them homework. I'd say to them, when you go home, for the next month, you are not allowed to push a poo out. And they'd look at me, they'd go, what do you mean? I say, you're just going to practice feeling what it feels like to let that sit there, let that pressure build. And guess what? Learn how to relax and surrender and allow that process. Now, thankfully, I don't have to always do that because we've got tremoring and allowing people to practice that here. But all the things we tend to be doing, we're trying to come into the body from the outside. Now, you all know how effective they are. So it's not in any way discounting any of the things we do. And also the movement, the birth dance and those semi-spontaneous movements that help things start to move again. And, we're already well aware of the effect of the TENS machine and vibration on the body in calming the system down. But this spontaneous shaking reflex is something else. Consciously we're limited in our ability to relax. Otherwise, we just tell every woman, you're okay, relax, let it out, let it go. But it's not under our conscious control. And despite everything we already do externally with massage and movement, all those things, there's this missing link in our Western culture's birth models and understanding. And this isn't just about birth. In our mental health model, shaking and tremoring is pathologized as a sign of anxiety, panic attacks, PTSD, social anxiety, which it's not. In the medical model, shakes and tremors have only ever been studied as a pathology of, if you've got MS or Parkinson's or some neurological condition. If you're at the gym and you're yoga and you're shaking, we all think it's a sign of weakness and a lack of control, and we stop the process. So we just completely misunderstood this in Western cultures. Now I'm going to stop my share because I want to tell you a little story here. So David Berselli, the TRE founder who developed this technique many years ago, I think it was about 10 or 15 years ago, he found himself delivering a TRE workshop to 50 traditional Swahili midwives. And he had an interpreter. And he's a very funny man. And he said, so here I am, I'm talking to these, and he said, there's these 50 big, strong black women, and they're all on the floor, and they're all tremoring away, and they're all yabbering away in Swahili, and I can't understand a word. And then one of the women yells out, push, mama, push. And the whole room erupts in laughter. He's got no idea why. So afterwards, when they got up through the interpreter, he said that. We said, why did you say that? And why was it so funny? And this traditional Swahili midwife, she said, oh, you white doctors, we know all about these tremors. And she went on to explain that in their traditional birthing culture, where they'll have women giving birth standing up, supporting under each arm, she said, we will not let that woman lie down after giving birth, sometimes for up to half an hour while her body is shaking and tremoring, convulsing, because if we don't, she's going to have problems afterwards. So having observed in traditional cultures, and there's many traditional cultures that use this spontaneous reflex for health and well-being and trauma recovery and all that sort of stuff. Having observed animals, if any of you know somatic experiencing, Peter Levine, his first experiences was African gamekeepers who said, when we capture a wild animal and we anesthetize it, dart gun and that, the gamekeepers said to him, when we release that animal, when it comes back to life, when it comes out of anesthetic, if it shakes and tremors, it will live. If it doesn't, that animal will die because it's still in an immobility, collapse, overwhelm state. So this is also relevant to cesareans and women coming out of cesareans as well, and any form of general anaesthetic. Now, the Western research, postpartum shivers, it gets called, 43% is the figure. You can imagine that if that wasn't seen as a sign of being cold, out of control, anxious, traumatized, that figure would potentially be very close to 100%. And all the research into postpartum shivers and in most other things operatively looks at body temperature, because it's obviously a sign that we're cold. But all the research stopped in the 70s and 80s because they found that when people were coming out of operations and shaking and tremoring, there was no change to core body temperature. So it didn't actually, not to deny that we can have shaking and tremoring to do with cold, that's as well. But in this case, it wasn't necessarily that. Great, thank you. So what we're talking about here is we're accessing this true bottom-up, body-based surrendering to the, to neurogenic movement. And this, I'm just going to show you a video now, which hopefully the sound will come through. Oh no, hang on, before I do that, sorry, just skipping ahead. Something else I want to mention here. So at each of these different states of the nervous system, which are based on the polyvagal theory of the autonomic nervous system, and I'm not going to go into it, but on my website at TRE Australia, I've got free resources, which are talks, and you can find out more about that. But there's also obviously hormones that are released according to what physiological state we're in. And of course, we get opioids where we start to go into a kind of bliss experience, but we're actually disconnected from our embodied self and our conscious mind, which is useful because it helps us deal with overwhelming pain and it helps us give birth. The adrenaline and vasopressin, fight and flight response, but then oxytocin when we're in deeply engaged states. Now, we tend to focus on, and it's true, that touch and eye gazing releases, and so social engagement releases oxytocin. But so too does spontaneous movement. And one of the key things, of course, of oxytocin is it actually increases muscle contractile force, which is obviously so super relevant to restoring the natural birth process. So here's a beautiful video of my friend and colleague Nina Brouwer from Denmark, who's a TRE provider and who recorded, oh, hang on, let me go back. Oh no, hang on, sorry. Let me start that again. I haven't got that in there. I'm going to stop my screen share. I'm going to open up a different window. Okay, now again, Joe, if you can just shell out and let me know that you've got the a blurry video there. And if
nothing yet.
Anything there yet?
Nope. Oh, yes.
There now?
Yeah.
Okay. And the sound is coming through.
I'd like to share my story of how TRE helped me giving birth to our son Rio. I think many women could benefit if they know about this natural shaking mechanism to release tension from the body. During the birth process, this mechanism of neurogenic tremors often turns on automatically, which, if you just let it shake, I experienced to be of great help during the birth process. We were hoping to give birth at home with the assistance of our midwife. We therefore prepared our house with extras to help us to go through the hours of the birth process. We played music, and I used a yoga swing to be able to stretch and support my body. Later, I was listening to meditative tunes while relaxing on a ball. But most of all, having learned TRE before giving birth and being familiar with the neurogenic tremoring of my body has helped me to trust the birth process and stay tuned to my body. The first wave started during the evening of the 6th of January 2015, but it took 20 hours before Rio was born. Right from the start, my waves already came every 3 minutes. I noticed how my body started to shake automatically and the movements were concentrated around the pelvic area. Knowing about TRE helped me to allow the neurogenic tremors to shake my body, and doing so to be able to let go of pain and to trust my body to know what to do. During the night I could tremor during a wave, fall asleep for 1 minute, and then it would start all over again. My husband and our midwife were of great support. They let me shake and shake in different positions. Pregnancy books tell you it is possible that your body starts to tremor during or after giving birth, but to use this natural shaking mechanism as TRE does is never taught in pregnancy classes. But I would say it's a must that both partners are familiar with the shaking that can occur and to be able to use it as a method of relaxation. Time passed by, shaking and breathing. And during the last hour before Rio was born, my left leg was shaking non-stop with the midwife supporting my left foot. And then there he was, our son Rio, immediately forgetting about pain and only enjoying this new life. I feel that having practiced TRE before giving birth and having experienced the neurogenic tremors allowed me to deliberately use them during birth to stimulate not only muscular relaxation and to reduce the pain, but to stay connected to my body. Furthermore, I feel the tremors have naturally helped me with the pelvic opening and the post-birth recovery. Because my pelvic floor always used to be tight and Rio was a big baby, almost 4 kilos. But I didn't need to be cut or stitched at all. Although the TRE organization cannot give a professional recommendation to use TRE...
Let me pause that there. Now, one of the questions that often then gets asked is it safe for the baby? All this shaking around, is that going to be dangerous for the baby? So just to frame this, I want to show you some other videos here. This is about a film we made about embodiment. It was made on YouTube. So here is some ultrasounds of babies at 9 weeks in utero. And the movements you can see there are all spontaneous. The babies are naturally twitching. This is actually the most natural thing in the entire world, and every single one of us has done this for 9 months in utero. And these movements create electrical and chemical discharges in the not yet innervated muscles. This shaking reflex is actually how the central nervous system connects with the periphery of the body. It's not driven by the nervous system. The muscles themselves or the tissues actually vibrate. So every single one of us has had this experience in utero. It's actually how we become embodied. Here's another baby at 12 weeks. So again, these movements all completely spontaneous, involuntary, nothing to do with conscious movement, nothing to do with the cognitive mind. These huge movements. And even once the nervous system and the periphery of the body has made these connections in utero, it continues on because this is how we develop our body schema, and our central nervous system knows where our arm is, how it feels, how it moves. This functional MRI is extraordinary. So again, these movements are all spontaneous, nothing to do with conscious movement at all, purely neurogenic in utero. Now, if you look at the outside of that woman's belly, you can see it's hardly moving. You can't see it necessarily on the outside. And, oh, that was a different video. And so most women, it's suggested that can't feel these movements up until average maybe 18 to 25 weeks or something. You would all know better than me. Sometimes as early as 13 weeks, but it's happening from the very, very start of conception. So there is nothing more natural in the world than your body spontaneously moving, than a birthing mother's body spontaneously moving. But of course, if we don't understand what this is, if we feel scared, if we've got a whole 35 years of thinking that when I'm shaking, this is a sign I'm out of control and I'm nervous and I'm in shock and I'm in trauma and I'm panicking, the physiology is going to suppress that. And the option for the body to downregulate and to birth naturally is gone. And this is the potential that doulas have, and you guys are in a unique position here because the medical fraternity, because of the evidence-based barriers that are there for them, this is going to be 20 years until they can look at this, until it's going to become mainstream practice. And in the next 20 years, you know how many babies are going to miss out on having a more natural, not to say that every baby is going to be more naturally, but the impact there is huge. And as doulas, you have a unique opportunity to pre-educate women, even if you're not teaching them the tremoring, but to explain this to them. In an ideal world, I'd love the researchers to be able to there say, this is safe and we can do it. Or pre-conception. And then to be there during the birth and supporting them when it is getting overwhelming and allowing their nervous system to down-regulate and restore that natural movement. And just got a couple more slides I want to show you before we do it. And this is something I think, you know, what is birth if not the ultimate experience of surrendering to the spontaneous involuntary movements of the body? And in Western culture, women who've never given birth before have almost no experience of that. We're used to containing, and so learning how to surrender to the body is not the same thing as in obviously surrendering to the uterus and the intensity potentially. But I can't think of anything else in the world that actually lets women have a remote kind of experience of learning how to let go and surrender. After the birth, what difference might it make if a mother's nervous system has completely relaxed back to a calm, relaxed place where she's in love and open and full of oxytocin, to breastfeeding and let down or letting go? What difference would it make to attachment? And I don't just mean about that breastfeeding attachment, I actually mean about the attachment in relationships. Because if I'm in a physiologically traumatized state, my physiology, it doesn't matter how I relate cognitively or behaviorally, the nervous system of my child is neuroceptively below the level of conscious control or awareness, sensing how my body is. So if my father or my mother is tight and braced, not even consciously aware of it, but their physiology is going, life is scary, life is dangerous, that's what my nervous system starts to resonate towards. I learn that life is dangerous and we must be tense. This book, Attached, I can't remember who's written it, Heller, I think. It's not a brilliant book, but what's great about it is it relates attachment theory back to physiological states. They don't explain it this clearly in the book, but avoidant attachment when we're in these immobilized states, anxious attachment when we're mobilized. And then, of course, when we're down-regulated, we have secure attachment. So being able to help mothers through that, babies, fathers, other families, to down-regulate and release the unresolved bracing of birth trauma, the potential impact for births, babies of the world, of the future is immense. Because it's not just about a healthy birth, it's what a healthy nervous system, what a better relationship between the caregivers who are more calm and relaxed, what that then means for the rest of our entire lives. Now, I could talk to you for days and days about this, but I do want to allow some of you to have an experience of it because I want to show you how simple and easy it is to actually connect with this. And also because as doulas, do you ever go into a traumatic situation where you have to contain your own personal experience, put that aside in order to do your job, just like any first responder would, like any soldier would? That's a skill. And doulas are amazing at that. But imagine if you could be even more grounded, even more physiologically calm in those stressful moments. It's going to make not just your skills better, but your nervous system is going to create greater safety for that woman's nervous system. And then when you do go home and there's the trauma, you will have a skill where you can actually down-regulate your own physiology. And once the body's released that pattern, the body response to that memory is effectively gone or extinguished. Doesn't mean it happens instantly and every single time, but it's the body that's carrying those processes around below the level of our conscious control. So in a moment, I'm going to ask for some volunteers, probably about 10, so I can fit you on the screen. And I just want to explain that when you're starting to experience spontaneous neurogenic movements for the first time, we want to teach you how to regulate them so you don't feel overwhelmed and you feel in control. So there's two aspects to it. The first aspect is cognitively, everything above the surface of the iceberg. If you start to feel tense, nervous, uncomfortable, uncertain, right, just stop and have a break. It's very easy, and we'll stop as soon as you experience a bit of a tremor. But More importantly, and I'm only just going to touch on this because this is really what TRE is brilliant at, is actually helping people learn to relate to their physiology, so we can feel what's happening below the level of our conscious mind in our subconscious. Is while you're starting to tremor, if you start to feel tired or fatigued, if you feel your body bracing against the movement, starting to resist, if your breath starts to hold, or if there's any pain, your body creating pain, these are all signs that your physiology is feeling like it's too much. So you could be sitting there tremoring and people have a tense face, and cognitively got no idea that my pelvic floor is squeezed on, that my forehead's tightened up, because we all live in these states all the time. So while you're tremoring, I'm going to keep reminding you, and as soon as you get a tremor, we'll get them stopped. Now, it'd be wonderful if a couple of you could share with the rest of us what effect that had in terms of in your physiology and in your nervous system.
Hey, so I could feel my body resisting a lot. I would get to a spot where I could feel my legs shaking, and I would go, okay, relax into it, and then would stay for a few seconds, and then it would go.
Yeah.
So I could feel a lot of resistance in my body. My face, though, I found it actually quite relaxing. When I was jiggling, I could feel my face. Like when you said to be aware of your face, I was like, oh, my face is so relaxed right now.
So two things there. This is the very first time you've done it. Now that you've done it, the next time you do it, you just start to soften and open every time you stop. What I say to people is the best thing you can do to facilitate your tremors and actually build up more freedom of movement is to stop and have a break, because your body goes, oh, that was a bit scary. Oh, hang on, I'm okay. And then the next time it starts to free up. So we just get this progression very quickly. Like if you were allowed to do 20 minutes of tremoring, and every time you felt resistance, you stopped and then you relaxed, you would find you had no resistance very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Now, the second thing is, I love what you said there. I could feel the resistance, but I couldn't relax it. Is anyone relating this to what happens during birth? Failure to progress, that's what it is. It's physiological resistance that's got nothing to do with my conscious mind. Now, I'm not saying that all the cognitive things we do don't have relevance. And I remember Rhea Dempsey, I can never forget her saying, you can do 20 years of psychotherapy in one good birth. So it's not to discount all of that amazing psychodynamic stuff, because it's often the psychodynamic stuff that's getting in the way of us learning how to surrender. So this is exactly where, if you've learned how to do this and, oh, my body's resisting, relax, because what we're actually resisting is the relaxation, because the shaking and tremor is associated. Now, that's happening with women in birth all around the Western world. This is the potential. Thank you. I think, Stacey, were you going to share something as well?
Yeah, hi everybody. It was basically just the same as what Kayla was saying, but I definitely felt that resistance, but a little bit hard to kind of relax. But then at the same time, I felt really relaxed as well. So I think resisting to the tremors getting bigger, I was definitely feeling, but at the same time, it was quite a relaxing experience to do, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, although I could feel like in my upper arms and in my arms, and if I raised my hands, raised my arms up off the ground, then they would tremor really easily. So it was like this really gentle kind of vibration that was just occurring throughout my whole body, but not obviously taking over and this huge vibrating experience. So that's something that's meant to happen, I guess.
Yep, absolutely. And as you do it, theoretically, your whole body should be able to shake and tremor. And one thing I want to pick up on what you said there is resistance. When we think about resistance, our traditional psychotherapeutic kind of approaches, it's something that it's a belief, and which it partly is, but it's actually physiological. And so we're trying to access the physiology. This is why, you can do, if you're not incorporating the physiology of the body and the physiological shifts, you can do 20 years of psychotherapy and never get anywhere.
Yeah.
If you do psychotherapy and you incorporate the crying and the movements of the body, it's going to be amazing. So it's not about one or the other, but it's about, this is often a missing link, because when a woman is struggling in labour, it's not necessarily anything to do with a psycho-emotional thing. It can be. It's physiological. And this gives us a direct access into so effectively, what is it that's resisting? The body is resisting. The body is the subconscious mind. And this is the way of the body coming out of it. So you can imagine, if the first time you experience physiological resistance is in the peak of labour, this is a whole new thing. If you've been practicing this and you already understand this process and you go, oh, okay, when I hit resistance, what I've got to do is let that contraction get stronger, not try and calm it down, but to get more effective, to allow greater tension, then everything starts to change. Sorry, I get a bit excited when I get a bit passionate about this. Thank you for sharing. I want to give you a bit of a break before you go on to the next session, but let me just share my screen. I want to give you some information so you kind of know where to go from here. So there's the aspects of it with your job, but I also really want to invite you to consider the impact this makes in your own physiology when you're working in so often traumatic, stressful, intense situations. It's a no-brainer for you just to lie down and shake it off. When you come home, you can do your tremoring in bed. Why I'm so passionate about doulas, and we had two doulas at our second child's birth, is because you guys are in the perfect position to be able to educate women, to support women from pre-pregnancy through, to help them learn how to do this, to actually learn and practice this process, because it's one thing to get it intellectually, oh, the tremors are okay. It's another to be able to surrender it into the body, and another then to be able to surrender to the intensity of the contractions of birth. And then there's the post-birth trauma. And if you can get people's nervous system down-regulated straight afterwards, they don't need to go into PTSD. You can have an impact on their breastfeeding, on attachment, on all of the family dynamics. And so, I would love that as many doulas as possible can come to that one-day introduction workshop. And from there, the ideal vision for me would be that doulas would do TRE training. So you're not just going, I can support the tremors and understand them during birth, but you actually know how to teach women this process. So you can work with a woman who's been through a horrendous traumatic birth, or someone who's had a cesarean, and you know how to empower them with this skill. So it's not just about come and see me, I'm going to teach you and be the therapist. This is what I'm most passionate about. Is my job is just to reconnect you with something that's already inside your body, a resource that every single woman, father, child, doula on the planet has got access to if we simply let them know about it. So I hope that's been useful for you. Again, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak to you. And if you've enjoyed